I'm joined by two guests now to be with me and take your calls. Erol Morkoc rather, is Vice Chair of External Relations with Republicans Overseas. Jovian Radeshwar is a professor of international relations and American politics at Douglas College and a registered Democrat. Thanks so much to both of you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining us on this program this afternoon. Jovian, let's start with you. What did you think of what you saw?
Oh, it was a train wreck. I was already a reluctant Biden voter back in 2020, and it's incredibly difficult to watch the guy struggle as much as he did. Trump obviously made many, many false statements and many inflammatory and I would even say dangerous statements during the debate. But it's clear that from a TV optics point of view, that he won the debate. And of course, that's going to be very much the spin. It already is the spin out there. Biden, I think, should step aside, to be perfectly honest.
That seemed to be the opinion of many Democrats or commentators last night. Is that still possible?
I'm not entirely sure. Biden, of course, came out swinging this morning saying that he will not step aside and that he just, had a bad day. And there's already this talk about him having a cold and this sort of thing and making excuses for the performance. I don't know. The fact that the debate was so early is interesting. It was planned to be this early. That's very unusual. Normally they happen after the conventions. I almost wonder if it was this early because maybe people expected this and they wanted to have time to ask him to step aside. I don't have any proof for that. It's just
he asked for it, right? Or he agreed to these terms.
Exactly right. Exactly. His team wanted it. They worked together with CNN to put this together with the special rules and everything. And he clearly did not live up to expectations.
And Erol, what about you? What were your thoughts watching last night's presidential debate?
Well, beyond the sort of obvious experience that we all had, I honestly thought that Joe Biden did slightly better than some of us expected him to. He only froze up completely one time. He was unable to be understood in a lot of situations, but that's kind of common. And also in his defense, the incumbent usually doesn't do well in the first debate. So a lot of things to take away that at first, yes, it looked very bad for Biden, but nobody expected this man to go off of a teleprompter and suddenly be able to speak freely without having problems. I think that the debate format was the most interesting thing. It was done in a way to sort of neutralize Trump's natural gravitas with a crowd or with one-liners. But in doing so, it created an environment where Trump was almost held back from some of his natural tendencies that only play to his base and don't play to undecideds or moderates who might see that behavior as unpresidential. You noticed during the Gulf thing, Trump was the one who said, let's stop being children. So it was an interesting debate. I wouldn't say that Trump did exceptionally well, but he definitely outperformed President Biden substantially. The question comes down to, do the American people, and I don't think it's spin, by the way. I mean, everybody is saying what they're saying because we all saw it. We saw a man who struggled with some simple explanations. He struggled with some complex explanations. And he certainly didn't give off confidence to me just as an American citizen, regardless of my politics. So the question comes to, I don't also think that they can change him out. I don't think that that's the plan. Joe Biden very well is still 50-50 in this race. It's just a few percentage points and it's a first debate. So I wouldn't want to read too much into it, would be the takeaway here.
Okay.
It was a win for Trump, but an expected win.
Now he performed, he obviously, seemed louder and stronger, more vocal and stayed focused, as you said, but did also repeat falsehoods, including about the last election's results. Does he expect that to be accepted by the audience?
Certainly he does. His claims that he's offered CNN to have a sort of a town hall on it. He wants to present his side of it. Now, obviously, is he
for which there's no evidence?
No. Well, I'm here to say that the way that he sees it and the way that his supporter sees it is that book is not closed. And so whether or not that's seen as inflammatory, he still feels that the circumstances in 2020 led to, perfect storm. Now, Is that correct in a court of law? Obviously not. He's not president right now, but he's entitled to have his opinion, and Joe Biden is entitled to, refute that. And a lot of his supporters, if you go to the Republican Party and ask your casual voter, was that election on the up and up? Not was it deliberately stolen, but did you feel confident in that election? And a lot of people are going to tell you no. More people are going to tell you there was something going on. I don't know what it was. Is that misinformation? Is that fake news succeeding? It doesn't matter because the election is in November, and that's the real collective conscience of America. So facts, of course, in a campaign go out the door a lot more than facts in real life. And that's what we've been seeing with a lot of promises from Joe Biden's campaign that didn't deliver in real life. Whereas maybe Donald Trump talks in inflammatory ways and says certain things, but when he was in office, he delivered on his promises. So that's the two sides of that coin that I would look at.
And Jovian, so we've heard from Erol, his perception as well, which was the observation last night of how Biden did. What were your thoughts about how Trump did?
He did well as far as the television audience goes, and of course he has a great deal of experience in that particular media format for many years, having been on reality TV shows and this sort of thing, having been in the media spotlight for much of his adult life, going back to his time in New York City back in the 80s and the 90s even. But I definitely think that there will be a backlash among voters, especially, of course, Democrats, with regard to comments that Trump made, certainly about January 6th, as you were just alluding to in your question with Errol, but also his comments about immigrant crime were especially alarming. He used superlative numbers like hundreds of thousands of people being killed by immigrants during his speech about this particular question, his answer to this particular question. And that, of course, echoes quite strongly with his comments on the campaign trail about immigrants, quote, poisoning the bloodline of America, which is a quote that's not so far off from what we've seen with other right-wing populist leaders in different time periods, as well as in the current time period as well. So there will be alarms going off that this is what Trump is planning. Now, of course, the fact of the matter is Biden didn't get this message out during the debate. He didn't do it in an effective way at all. There's a Project 2025 that's been set up by the Heritage Foundation down at Stanford University in the United States that has a blueprint for a radical right-wing takeover of the American government. If Trump voters are not necessarily responding to that or aware of that, that's a big problem. But it's even a bigger problem if Democratic voters are not aware of that. And I don't think Biden did a particularly good job of illustrating that. It was an opportunity, frankly, and a better candidate would have been able to at least make a point about the threat to American democracy that Trump poses. Project 2025 also has a very radical interpretation of executive power with regard to what presidents can do. And that also is in many ways against American traditions of checks and balances and limited government.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let's just take some calls here as we have quite a few people wanting to comment. Thanks very much to my guest right now, Erol Morkoc, who's Vice Chair of External Relations with Republicans Overseas, and Jovian Radeshwar is Professor of International Relations and American Politics at Douglas College, and also a registered Democrat. We're going to take your calls asking you how you feel after last night's U.S. presidential debate and what moments stood out for you. 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950 are our numbers. We're going to hear from someone in the United States right now, just across the border at Point Roberts, and Michael's on the line. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Welcome. What do you think?
For standout moments, unfortunately, Biden repeatedly confusing Trump and Putin, trying to American people. Trump constantly cozies up to dictators like Putin. Trump even famously told Putin to do whatever he wants. Biden stumbled over his words and repeatedly said the name Trump instead of Putin and didn't get that message out. I also, while I was on hold, heard your guest say something about Trump delivering on its promises. I want to remind the world, one of Trump's promises before he was first elected was waterboarding and worse, torture, to bring back torture and more new, worse
Okay.
forms of torture. That has an effect on dictators and tyrants and torturers around the world. I think Biden and the Democrats need to remind people of that. His constant stirring up violence, cozying up to dictators, those are not popular. If Biden decides or the party decides for him, he needs to step down. Chris Murphy, the senator of Connecticut, would be an excellent choice. I think the American people would like him as a leader. There are
Why
other
do you
good
think that?
choices. Chris Murphy, because he's reasonable. He is a good communicator across the board.
Okay. And Michael,
Bidens that are popular but has it together.
that's the question before the Democrats right now is what to do after last night's debate in light of Biden's performance. Thanks so much for the call from Point Roberts. Let's head to Bowen Island, and Anton is on the line now. Hi, Anton.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for calling. What did you think last night?
Well, I only watched it briefly because I was expecting the worst, and I knew it in forehand already that what would happen, and I think we all did. And I would like to point out that the Democratic Party made a strategic mistake when they chose Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was doing the right thing.
Okay, you're going back to 2016 then? Or?
Yeah, because basically that's where it all started, and we see the effects of it today. We're still basically in that whole era. And I also want to your two guests you have, like the whole, if you want to destroy society, have two parties, Democrats and Republicans, and make everything so divisive, it doesn't work. So, this is a really difficult time for most Americans, no doubt. But there are fascist forces at hand, and they must realize that. Also with what your guest mentioned about the Project 2025, that's just really bad stuff.
You're getting to what are the choices as well before the voters this November, Anton. Thank you very much. I'll put that question first about did the Democrats make a mistake? As Anton says, going back to 2016, I mean, where does this leave the Democratic Party? What kind of Democratic Party are we looking at right now, Jovian?
A deeply illegitimate one that doesn't appear to stand for anything particularly coherent. Of course, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, and of course, before that, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton are representatives of the centrist wing, or even some might say the right of center wing of the Democratic Party. Neoliberalism, lots of budget cuts, lots of handouts to corporations, that being the sort of norm for how policies would be implemented, not an emphasis on public spirit or, social togetherness, which is, of course, the vision of somebody more like Bernie Sanders, who I happen to be more of a ardent supporter of in the past, having made phone calls for his campaign in 2016 and 2020 myself. And as I said before, I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden either. I only voted for him because I felt like I, of course, had no choice other than to stop Trump. This time around, the damage is done, right? There's this sort of Project 2025 issue, but then also Biden has lost a lot of the youth vote around his foreign policy, especially with regard to Israel and Gaza. So the perfect storm of forces in terms of setting Trump up for a relatively easy victory. Maybe the polls haven't moved yet, as the other guest has indicated. The polls haven't moved yet. It's still relatively 50-50. Odds makers are certainly saying that Biden's chances of winning have gone down from about 38% to about 23% this morning, according to the official odds lines from Vegas. I think we will see movement in the coming days on this matter, and the Democrats are in a very tough spot. It's interesting that a previous caller mentioned Chris Murphy. I don't have any problem with Chris Murphy, but the problem is name recognition. And also, as the other guest mentioned, there isn't maybe enough time for the Democrats to replace Biden with somebody else to get the kind of traction needed for that sort of long campaign season that we have in the United States, as opposed to Canada, where we have a much shorter campaign season.
Erol, let me ask you as well. Anton talked about, you have this deep division between the two parties, the supporters of the two parties in the United States. What about the Republican Party? How would you describe where it is right now then?
Oh, I would say it's a big tent. For example, I'm an immigrant from a Muslim country. My entire family is from a Muslim country on one side. Everybody's voting for Trump. You've got record support in the Hispanic community, building in the Republican Party in general for the last 20 years, but now you're seeing it at record numbers. You're seeing for the first time Trump making actual statistical inroads with the African American community. Trump had a line that a lot of people liked to laugh at, which was, if you have patriotism in your heart, there's no room for prejudice. But as an immigrant to America, one of the great things that I experienced as a child was seeing all the diversity working together. And I think that country that I grew up in faded away post 9/11. You had distrust and the sort of malignant tumor in our culture. So I think the Republican Party has capitalized on this new generation. Younger voters are trending conservative, young men especially, obviously. And then also you have the data that shows that if only married people voted, Republicans would win every election. So you have cultural situations where there's groups of people who trend towards the Republican Party, and those people, it doesn't matter of their race or ethnicity or economic background. People who that I grew up with in Virginia, I grew up with all sorts of people, and some people told me, Errol, I went from lower class to middle class, and I'm back down there, and I feel that because of inflation. And now that's not directly Joe Biden created inflation as one man. It's just a president, but in the end, the Republican Party has become a very big tent, and what it was in the age of Bush is completely gone. We almost don't even consider him a Republican anymore. So the party's changed drastically, and that's because of Donald Trump.
Okay. Well, thanks to both of you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Erol Morkoc is Vice Chair of External Relations with Republicans Overseas. Jovian Radeshwar is a Professor of International Relations and American Politics at Douglas College and a registered Democrat. It is 12:26 now Pacific Time.